It sound right, boys. It sound right, boys. It sound right, boy.
Welcome back for your Reframing Picky Eating course. So this is where we're going with all the things that we've learned in the last two videos about triggers and stress responses and food, and sort of weave it all together to come up with a brand new way of approaching the challenges that come along with picky eating. So it's important to remember what we're going to try to do here is set the stage in the lives of children who are struggling with their relationship with food, so that we're going to bring the anxiety connected to food and the stimulation and the sensory processing stuff kind of back to baseline for them, so that we will be able to have more success when we start to do exposures, because that's another topic altogether. But right now all we want to do is set the stage so that things feel a little bit better for children with their relationship with food, and adults play a very big part in how they approach this. So this is just some really big strategies that we need to put in place before we can start expecting children to try to eat new foods. So let's get started. So we need to make sure that we know that each child is going to need a different approach. Um, some children, based on their nutritional needs, you may want to start with a food that's really super jam packed nutrition wise. Sometimes, because of children's rigidity, we just want to stretch them a little bit further into maybe something that's they can already eat, and then sort of layer something that maybe is the same color or the same texture, or maybe is the same sort of smell for them, depending on how their specific anxiety is around food. So if know that if somebody comes to you and says that, oh, this is the way to do it, works with all children all the time, know that that's not really what we need to talk about. We need to really look at individual children, where they are, where they are nutritionally, and then think about what is the best thing for this family and also for that child. So it's really important that everybody who is in the lives of children need to be on the same page. If we have a teacher who really thinks we should be doing it one way, and a parent who thinks we should be doing it the other way, and then a babysitter who thinks everything that you're doing is a big pile of crap, know that that kind of inconsistency, when you on the get go, will make things way more challenging for the child to get the right message. So, what we want to do here is sort of forget about the old things that we've learned in the past and sort of move forward. So, these slides are really about the things that we have been doing in the past that just don't work. And if it was so easy, there will be no picky eaters, as I always say. So, as we said, this whole idea about lowering anxiety and then increasing positive exposures to foods is really where the magic happens. So, in the next video, where we talk about the do's and about all of the great ways that we can help children develop a new relationship with food, we are going to talk more about. Let me get my pointer going here. Oh no, that's not the right one. Oop, these are two. We're going to way more in this in the fourth video about the positive exposures with food. One of the things we're going to talk about in this video really is 10 things that we do that actually makes this arrow go in the other direction. We are so in it to win it some days with children that we are sort of messed up in how we want to go about trying to expose children to new foods, and our ideas around what children should be eating and why they're not eating. And when our anxiety is up high, and we're pressuring and causing a lot of pressure to try to eat new foods, then we actually do sort of, it's like shooting yourself in the foot kind of thing to trying to move things forward. So here they are. Let's settle in here for now, the next little bit, and talk about the 10 mistakes that not just parents, we should have updated this slide. It's not just parents, it's sometimes it's very well meaning therapists, sometimes it's teachers, sometimes it's doctors, it's we do sort of have this idea that there's certain ways that we need to feed children, but here's the mistakes that we often make. So we're going to go through each one of these slides, and hopefully, what the the thing that you need to take out of this is not a whole lot of like, oh my God, what did I do? How did I add to this problem? How did I make it worse? Because tomorrow could be a new day and we can start to do new things and really sort of change children's relationship with food easily and not really carry around a whole lot of guilt about something that we may have done in the past. So know that we are, sort of letting go of what we've done in the past and really see the possibilities in some new strategies. So here's something that people we don't get a chance to talk a whole lot about, but there are a group of children um, who really do need to look at a reduction in gluten and dairy. And sometimes we go see docs, and they say, yes, there's definitely a gluten allergy, there's definitely a dairy issue, and we need to um, get the stuff out of the kids' diets. And while that is true, children probably do. There is a population of children who really do need the gluten and the dairy taken out of their diets. But know that often with these children, the gluten and dairy are the things that they are drawn to, that they really, really like, that they maybe everything in their diet has gluten and dairy. So if we go in and radically remove everything from these children's diets in order to make space for new foods, then you cause a really big problem. It's important that we go very slowly. If we're going to try to remove some gluten and dairy out of children's diets, it's important that we do it slowly. If children have an anaphylactic reaction to these kinds of things, that is a completely different scenario. But know that we really do need to take into account children's anxiety around food. If you have a child who just sort of shovels in food and they're not really a lot of anxiety connected to food, you might be able to do it a bit easier. But picky eating requires a different thing. And but there is some lots of really good things that happen when you do get some gluten and dairy out of children's diets, especially some children on the spectrum. So just know that we do need to make changes very slowly. So here's another really big thing. Um, Sometimes we go on the path of taking out things first before we think about what we can add things in. So we tell people because the removal of things that often these children are really physiologically addicted to, like the gluten and the dairy, which is another whole topic. But know that children do get addicted to these things because they do have a bliss point in your brain that makes it so that you want to eat these things over and over again. That really the best strategy would be to try to add new things first. So then you can sort of slowly drift away from the things that may not want there anymore. Um, and know that we try to make the food situation for children not an all or nothing sort of situation, because there are some days you're going to want to lay back and let children have certain kind of treats and those kinds of things, not all the time, but there's some days that you want to have. Structuring a healthy relationship with food is about balance. So know that if you do swoop in and take away all of the things that you don't want them to eat anymore, think about what's left. If you go in and say, okay, the french fries and the chicken nuggets and the mac and cheese and all that stuff need to go, if they are left with nothing to eat, and then you have to go build up with new strategies in order to teach them how to eat new things, there will be a period of time when your child is extremely hungry. Their sugar will be extremely dysregulated. They will be wondering why. It's way better of an approach that will have less trauma if we really focus on what can we add first. Let's work on building rather than taking things away. And that's a strategy that sometimes people go, "Oh, of course," after we teach it to them. But uh, it's really one of those things that can be really helpful in helping children build their confidence in eating new foods. So, here is one that is a carryover from how we were probably parented, how we've seen other parents be successful with certain children. But pushing and begging children to eat a new food is is never going to work with an extreme picky eater. There's other strategies that we can do, especially if people get into full fight, flight, and flood, and there's a battle line at your table, at your kitchen table. And know that your tension and being in it to win it when we push and beg children to eat a new food in a harsh way, if we push and beg, that we are actually making the anxiety bigger and reinforcing the anxiety and making people both stuck, making children stuck in heightened anxiety. This is, if we could go back to the slide with the arrows, pushing and begging with a tone and a body language that feels unsafe to children will actually make the anxiety around food higher. So you're reinforcing the resistance when you do it that way. And if there is a true sensory processing disorder, know that you cannot beg away a sensory processing disorder. If children are truly in fight, flight, and flood, you won't be able to just beg and reinforce that situation out of them if it is an extreme case. So that's something that we need to consider for sure. The big one is fear. So this is an often case of parents are bigger than children. Amygdalas, which Lori talked about in her video, are constantly on scanning to see if they feel this type of body language standing over a child, being bigger than a child, pointing down on them. Your brain doesn't know what else to do but to go into fight and flight in that situation. So, if we wanted to say improve this situation here, we would tell these. We come from the work of a great researcher named Dan Siegel, who tells parents that they actually need to get down here and be lower than children when children reach this stage, because this is a child, like, let's look at her body language. Her head is down, her hands are over her eyes. It's a whole lot of shame going on here. We could do an entire course about shame and punishment, and what it does to children and how it really can lead to a lot of other challenging behaviors. So if we want to improve children's relationship with food, we know that we cannot punish. Punishing children for not eating and not trying a new food will increase the anxiety in your whole house. So that's a hard one for parents to get out of, because It's sort of ingrained in us because I keep on saying we're in it to win it. And we often are, and our frustration and our inability to reframe how challenging this behavior is right here makes us very triggered. And then we fall into, really antiquated and dated discipline approaches where we think that we're going to be helpful by punishing and discipline. And know that discipline is about teaching. It's not about taking things away or making children feel worse about themselves. Quality, first class discipline strategies is about teaching. And this is not teaching. This is really making the situation a bit more complicated. So here's something that sometimes we fall into as well, that we say, if you don't eat this, then you can't have your favorite food. So here's what happens in the anxious brain and children, children who have developmental delays, children who are living on the autism spectrum, children who are quick to go, people say from 0 to 100, withholding their favorite foods to punish them for not eating a new food has a very significant risk of their favorite food, one of the things that they are eating, getting connected in their minds to a negative emotion, a negative feeling, and then them surrendering that food as well. So it's a strategy that we go to sometimes because we think it's going to motivate children to be involved in the process of eating new foods. And really what it has the potential to do is blacken that food out from their list of things that they'll eat as well, which can be a real danger when children are really only eating 5 to 6, maybe 10 things if you're in the land of the extreme eating. So we tell people to really try all they can to not stay in the land of punishment and definitely not withholding a child's favorite food when you were trying to motivate them to eat something new. So here's another one. Here, I love this picture. It's an old British saying, I think, and it's in a great Pink Floyd song too. Um, and we say this to things like this: if you eat this, then you can have that. And if you do this, then you can have that. The if then stuff is very popular in programming in the autism world. And sometimes, and it might work in a situation maybe where somebody is really calm and the amygdala is not triggered, but in a really heightened situation with something that's a very challenging thing for kids to do. For this phrase to be successful, it's it's not a out of the gate kind of phrase to be saying to people. It also will only work on a day when a child feels very great, when it's a green light day, we call it. When, maybe they've slept, they're very regulated, they've had lots of really great social interactions, they're very emotionally regulated, that they might be able to participate in an if then situation. But if a child is very dysregulated, not feeling well, hungry, maybe it's the end of a long day, because this is when we pull this stuff out, right? It's at the end of a long day when we're all frustrated and tired and it's supper time and we really just want children to eat. So when we pull this phrase out, we need to be very cautious because here's what it's saying. If you look underneath this phrase, it's telling kids and that the thing that we want them to do is so hard and horrible and difficult, and we know that it's hard for you, that we're going to give you something at the other end. And that can be true. There's always this balance of how are we going to support children through something that's really hard for them. And how we say that phrase, is like, if you do this, then we're going to get to do this. Or like, if you do this, then only then will you get to do this. How our tone is and how we present it to children is really important. And how we present it to them is important too. Because we want children to feel really successful when they've done something that's really hard for them, not like, oh, I was forced to do something that I didn't want to do. And it's also in this phrasing of this that tells us, and it also tells children who already know that they are significantly challenged in this area. Children who are picky eaters know that they're picky eaters. They know that it's hard for them. And this phrase is on top of them already having the inner awareness of knowing how hard it is for them, is also giving them the message that we know how hard it is for them too. So how we use this is very important, and it shouldn't be our go-to out of the gate. Maybe within weeks and months of really focusing on one specific food, um, then it's a time to pull it out, but it's definitely not an out of the gate sort of thing. And you do need to be really kind of hovering over your whole chessboard to be able to pull this one out. So here's another really important thing that we need to keep in mind. This is a strategy that sometimes we reach to just out of impulse pull out because it comes from a place of frustration. And sometimes we do it in a really overt kind of a way where we compare the abilities of one child to another one. And we say things like, I don't understand. This is so easy for your sister to do. Why can't you do it too? Look at all the things that she can eat. Look at all the things that she can do or he can do. And overtly sort of compare children, showing one child how deficient they are in one thing. It comes from a place of complete frustration with caregivers when we pull this one out. Now, sometimes we do it in a way that's like, just look what your sister's doing. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And how come, let's try to be more like, we, even with our voice and our tone, we try to make it a teachable moment to compare other children. But what we really want people to know is that when we, that comparison um, strategy that people use, sometimes from a place of kindness, sometimes from a place of frustration, can actually have some kind of really devastating long-term impacts. First of all, children who really struggle in certain areas, and when it gets to the point of what we call extreme picky eating or really restricted eating, they are fully aware that they have a challenge and that this is something that they struggle with. And what we want to be really conscious of is in this process, we want to be able to lift children up. We don't want to make them feel worse about themselves than they already do. When we start to do our working with parents about how to take good care of yourself and how to really pay attention to that voice that is that inner critic that carries us around with us as into adulthood, that we use to not be so nice to ourselves, comes from places where people were using shame and comparison and perfection as a method to get people to do things. And we don't want to participate in that because children, people already have enough of an inner critic inside of them that makes it so that they are feeling very challenged. Learned helplessness is a very real situation that can happen, especially with children with developmental disabilities, with ADHD, mood issues, those kinds of things. And we really want to get into the practice of following in the land of positive psychology, the whole idea that we need to lift children up. So comparisons are to be avoided at all costs, just because the long-term repercussions can really play it out with children in their lives as they grow turn into adults. So here's another big one. You need to be really flexible. When we're coming up with food therapy plans for people and little kids, we need to be really, really flexible. And we might need to make an adjustment as we move forward. Sometimes as we start to get into uh, different types of processes about what we might do to try to expose children to foods or what is going to be the food that we might try to do next, we need to know that we need to be very conscious of the fact that we need to be flexible. And the reason why we need to be flexible is because they can't be. So when children are, let's say we decide to start to do some kind of new food therapy where we're choosing to expose children to, I don't know, maybe eggs or chicken or something like that, super jam-packed nutritional needs, and everything goes off the rails. Maybe they stop sleeping, maybe they something happens at school or there's a breakdown in the relationship with their siblings. No, that means that we're moving too fast. So Sometimes, again, we're in it to win it and we want to keep pushing through, but sometimes we really do need to stop and know that we need to be flexible. Or maybe things are going better than we thought, and we were going to plan to do one food for 2 weeks, and then suddenly we're doing two or three foods. We need to know that it's our job as the adults to be as flexible as possible while we're moving children forward. And part of this flexibility is that adults' timelines and children's timelines are very different. And one thing I know for certain is that when we have our adult timelines and we build our timelines into the land of children, especially children who have complex needs and who are struggling, it almost always backfires. Adult agendas in the land of therapy with children is almost never successful. So we really do need to make sure that we are being very flexible. So here's a big one. These are all big ones, obviously. I keep saying here's a big one. Sometimes we live in the world, which is understandable because we do say all children are different and children reach milestones at different times and they all come to different things at different times, and that is true. Every child is individual. But when your kid is a really extreme picky eater, when they're really narrowing their foods and they're losing foods as they get older, um, we can't just play the wait and see game. Uh, Lots of times that's sort of the stand back and kind of go, oh, let's just wait and see. But you can say, "Let's wait and see," I guess, about certain things, but nutrition is a really big one because it's the things that you need in your body for your brain to function, to be able to regulate your blood sugar, to be able to sleep at night, digestion. It's about but nutrition is important for at the deep down cellular level of our health. So when you are dealing with a child who, say, has really heightened sensory issues, and maybe some tension or some developmental trauma or a diagnosis of something, they do need specialized interventions, but they need interventions that understand anxiety as well. So thinking that, oh, this is just something that you're just going to naturally grow out of, um, is really not to be recommended, even though paradoxically, I just said we need to go at their own timeline, and we do. But we do also need to know that we do need to have this at the forefront of our brains when we're talking about kids who are really, really extreme picky eaters. So maybe the answer is that you have to hold off on the food exposures, but maybe you need to figure out a way to top them up nutritionally with supplements or something like that until we're able to get people with a new healthy relationship with their food. So, this is one of the last things that we need to say, which is really important. I just did an assessment with a really smart mom today, and we were talking about how there's lots of professionals out there, highly respected people in our medical field, nurses, doctors, different types of therapists who really do not understand the necessity of taking care of your child's nutrition. So this is something that we put in the land of don'ts because there are some very uh, empowered and educated parents. And when they go to professionals and they say, I'm really concerned about my child's nutrition, they go, oh, don't worry about that. Or there's no research that says, some kids shouldn't be on a gluten-free diet. Or there's no evidence to say that when autistic kids are eating better, that their behavior improves. And if you have a professional who makes you feel that the way that you feel about that kind of stuff isn't that you are uninformed or not empowered or that they don't know as much as you. We say to people, if you hit a professional like that, it's time to find another one because your instinct of the necessity of better nutrition to help children cope better, to sleep better, to have better digestion, to feel better, to have better peer relationships is accurate. They do need all these things. So we tell people to find your tribe and find a group of people and holistic nutritionists and professionals out there who do really understand this stuff. Because when somebody tells you there's no research in the whole idea about nutrition and behavior or health or long-term health, know that they just really haven't read the research, and do not let them make you feel like you are some kind of a radical because you're concerned about nutrition. So we say find yourself a new doc or find yourself a new therapist because it's a really important thing. So that is our list of 10 things we would like people to let go of. Some of them are more challenging than other ones because we do come to our parenting skills and our approach to parenting, and especially our passion about taking care of our children from a place of great love and concern. And we really do always want the best for the children that we're working with or the children that we live with. But we really want people to know that some of if most of the things that we had in here and we turned them upside down and said go ahead and do them, they're what people are doing already and they're not working. So this is the reason why we're asking people to really take a step back, pay attention to the research, pay attention to what we know about anxiety and stress and food, and how the connection of understanding fight, flights, and floods connected to foods is really a new approach, and the reframing of it is really important. So, we're going to, in our next video, talk about the great things that we can do to help set the stage for better eating for all of our children who are picky eaters. Welcome back, everybody, to video 4 of your Reframing Picky Eating course. In the last few videos, we tried to put together the brain science along with the whole idea about picky being a stress behavior and a reaction that's like fight, flight, and freeze, and flood, we like to call it. And we talked a little bit about older strategies that we try to usually use when before we know the brain science and things that we all know if we're here trying to learn about picky eating, knowing that the things that we talked about in the last video are often things we have tried over and over and over again. And I think that we all know that they often don't work. Um, they may work in some very rare cases, but often sometimes it actually can increase anxiety, and you may see anxiety spilling out into other areas of people's lives when we're pushing children too hard to move to a new skill before they're ready. So, this video is 10 things that we would like people to try to do. And these are things that help to set the stage to create more green light moments. So, when your child will be more receptive to trying new foods in a low anxiety way. The idea about a green light day and a red light day is really important in these situations. And a green light day is when things are going really well and you think that this may be an opportunity or day to try something new. And a red light day is when you know this is not the day to do it. So we're looking for green light days. And these 10 things will help set the stage so that you'll have more green light days, which is really important. So we're going to jump in to take a look at the 10 things that we always recommend to our clients that people try to do to set the stage for picky eating, well, to reframe picky eating and to also set the stage for those green light days that we want so badly. And we hope that these will make sense to people, that we're not going to go directly at the picky eating. What we're going to do is really broaden the lens of our approach to helping to kind of just pepper all over children's relationship with food a new, healthier way of them seeing food and making sure that their anxiety is low before we start to expect them to put new foods into their mouth. So here we go. So, as we said, this is about setting the stage and doing some prep work. Meeting with somebody to make a decision about what's the food that you want to try to introduce is a good idea. Making sure that you are going to sort of make a plan and know that there's going to be some bumps in the road, possibly, but to make a plan and to actually sit down and think a little bit about this before we start to introduce new foods is a good thing. So, for the prep work, these 10 points are really important. So, the reason why we put this course together is because we really do want people to reframe how they see this behavior in children. And this is a really big point to remember, that this is a really hard thing for kids to do. And knowing that you could pick a food, let's say it's chicken or it's eggs, and that we are on the child's timeline in order to make this happen. It's not usually our timeline. We need to sort of really be open and flexible because our kids are so inflexible around their eating styles and eating choices and things like that. When people are really, really rigid, they'll only eat certain things on certain days and certain colors, those kinds of things, that it will take longer than we want it to be. That is a given. So we like to use this quote, and we know this to be true, that it takes up to 20 presentations of a food for children to be open to giving it a try. Now, if your child has, or the child that you're working with has a really sort of traumatic experience with food, maybe they've had a mouth injury or a really traumatic dental experience or medical trauma, it could take way longer. So we really need to fully appreciate how challenging this is for kids. Because if they could eat new things and were ready to do it, they would be doing it. So we do need to fully appreciate it, and that's part of the empathy that we need to adopt in order to really be with these children and sit with them while they're trying to learn this new skill. So that's the big point to remember, that we need to really go slow. Um, we talked about this before. Everybody needs to be on the same page, and everybody needs to know that children are different. Child is different. So we need to make sure that we're doing individualized programs. We need to make sure that what is a food for one child to try to make it so it's their next food to eat for a different another child. Even a sibling could be a different food. And as we talked about before, everybody in the lives of these children have to be on the same page. We can't have one person who's, you know, sneaking candy through the day, or making or really sabotaging another parent, or a partner. So we really do need everybody to be on the same page. We put this slide in again because we cannot stress enough that this is about lowering anxiety. When the anxiety is low, that's when you see less fight and flight, you see less stress behaviors, you see less exhaustion. And what we want to do is increase the positive experiences with food. So if we go back to this idea about 20 exposures, this is what we're going to talk about here right now. How are we going to have the best bang for your buck with Exposure World to make it so it's fun, it's productive, it's helping reframe how children are thinking about food, it's helping everybody see this problem through a new lens. And these positive exposures and experiences with food, we can add more of them into our lives with children. So here's the first thing that we tell people to do. We're really big advocates of journaling, food and mood journaling together. So we searched a long time to be able to find one that we liked, and we couldn't find one. So we wrote our own, and we love food journaling so much that that is the free gift that we gave along with this course. We can't recommend enough that people do it for 2 weeks at least. We have people journal for 12 weeks. And it shows, what it'll show is, wonder if the reason why Billy's having such a hard time with the language arts class is because it's just before lunch when he's hungry. Maybe his blood sugar is off. Or, wow, look what happened when Susan ate that red Mr. Freezy. Like, she just couldn't do anything, stay focused, couldn't, so writing what not only the foods that you eat, but then also the behaviors that you see can also help when you're tracking digestion, aggressiveness, mood, sleep. All kinds of things are very connected to food. So journaling is a really good way to help set the stage and to make a really, really wise plan moving forward. We just love journaling, and we know people who journal their food are more successful in all kinds of things. So if your doctor thinks that what you're trying to do, which is increase nutritional intake of your child, and the doctor thinks that you're working with thinks that that's a little bit crazy and unnecessary, we say to people, you really do need to add some people onto your team or find a new doc who really at least is open to the possibilities of learning more about this. The nutritional needs of children with autism, ADHD, ADD, anxiety, OCD are pretty specific. And, lots of doctors don't know about nutrition, and lots of social workers don't know about nutrition, and lots of other professionals don't as well. It's a very specific field. And when a person says to you, yeah, there's no research to show this, we can say that, you know what? They just haven't read the research. So if you do find somebody who doesn't really buy into it, if you can't get a new doctor, then you need to surround yourself with people who do, for sure, the professionals in your life. This is very important. We need adults to be really good food role models for children who don't eat well. So that means if you are interested in your child learning how to eat eggs, then you have to eat a lot of eggs and you have to eat them in front of your child. And you need to make yummy sounds while you're eating. I always laugh. We laugh a lot when I call it dinner theater. And it is dinner theater. This is where, if we really want our children to try new things, we need to try new things. We need to be excited about food. We need to make sure that we're involving them in the process, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. But that means, if it's the same as anything, if you want your child to do yoga, then you can do some yoga, like we need to be the change. So, a good role model around food, and actually even hamming it up a little bit and doing some acting around how you really love food. I got my kid to eat pomegranates by actually authentically being excited about the first time I ate one in years and how delicious it was. And, she's a picky eater and now she eats pomegranates. It's sort of an amazing thing to see. But it's one of those things where we can't stress enough the power of parents and professionals modeling really good eating habits in order to help shape those for their kids. And also, don't forget the power of siblings. In the land of pivotal response therapy, which I love, and I think that it's an excellent therapy to be using with children. Um, that's what we talk a lot about, is the power of siblings, and how siblings and peers can um, have a lot of impact. And if you want your kid to eat a new food, sometimes it's really helpful for a sibling to eat it first, and they can just sit back and watch, and you can have that interaction with another child, and then your sibling, your peers, kids that get to learn from their siblings. It's a really, really powerful thing. So don't if you have a sibling under your roof, that's great. If you have a cousin, a best friend, those kinds of things, using them along with the opportunities to try to broaden the food choices of kids is a really good idea. So, we always tell people, if you have a picky eater, you should try to, as much as you can, involve them in choices, in baking, cooking, um, going to the supermarket, maybe with a supermarket list, and asking them to help you buy the eggs for the cake, and then going home and making the cake together. And if you think about this idea about 20 exposures, if you have a situation, let's say you're cutting up peppers for stir fry, and you have a red pepper, and then you're cutting up asparagus, or you're cutting up something else to put in there, and that child is actually helping you in the kitchen, there's a lot of good things about that. It's the connection time, it's the regulation, emotional regulation around the food together, it's you being calm around the food, showing your child that it's a safe place to be, it's safe in the kitchen, it's safe to touch foods, it's safe to do things. There's a lot of really therapeutic advantages of a child being in the kitchen and helping, and baking and cutting up vegetables, and that kind of thing. There's a lot of therapeutic value in it, and when you can do it, we absolutely recommend that you do, especially the shopping stuff. Kids love, if you give them a list and say, help me buy the blueberries and help me find you think this cake is going to be good with all this extra fruit in it, those kinds of things. Involving them in that process is a really, really great tool to have to try to set up a red light. Can't oh, green light, sorry. I can't stress enough how much that one would really be helpful. So we've already talked about the speed and the need to go slow. When earlier in this video, we talked about adult timelines versus children's timelines. And we can't stress enough the need to go slow. And this can be painfully slow for adults because we may come from the land of wanting things fixed yesterday. And we are deeply concerned about our children and their health. So we sometimes push too much or expect too much. And this really is like the difference between a marathon and a race. And even though a marathon is a race, it's something that takes it's the longest of the races. It's really something that is a process. And this is not, a quick 5 days in, out kind of thing. Even families who would come to us for some of our longer therapy programs, we say to them, we don't promise that at the end of our therapies that a kid is going to suddenly be eating 50 new things and they're going to sit at the table every day and that it's going to be different than it was before in a big way. It is really tiny baby steps and it is a process. So we need to know that we need to go as slow as the child is telling us, and we're guided by the needs of the child and by the direction of the child. So on those days when, we had this happen once when a parent had sort of planned that they were going to do some really good food exposure, and it was going to be on a day that was right after swimming, which normally meant that that kid was going to be very regulated because swimming was one of the things that he really loved to do. And they were going to introduce chicken at supper, and he wasn't having a good day. They pushed the chicken at supper. It didn't work, and then they were back to square one. So just because you have it in your brain that we're going to do a chicken exposure after a certain thing and it's going to be on this day, we need to be flexible. Again, we need to be flexible because they're rigid. So we need to lend them our flexibility. So we can't stress this enough that this is a process and it is not a uh, something that can be fixed overnight. Um, we popped this in here for a bunch of reasons. Uh, Food supplements, vitamins, minerals, while they have gotten a bad rap, and while there are people out there that say, oh, supplements don't work, or vitamins and minerals are a waste of money, um, there are uh, lots of really great research now that says otherwise. And people who say that they don't work are often not really paying attention to the holistic nutrition research that um, that can really help. Because what we're talking about are organic supplements prescribed by a naturopathic doctor who really understands child development, nutrition, um, behaviors that are impacted by deficiencies in particular areas at a cellular level, which I mean like deep, deep, deep into the cells. So there's lots of anxiety behaviors, let's say, for example, that are connected to magnesium, to your vitamin B being low, to your vitamin D being low. So if you can find somebody who can help you tease out those things that your child might be deficient in, supplementing can get you through the picky eating until you're able to introduce more foods or better foods. And some people may need a little bit more than others, but just going to the supermarket and picking up a bottle of Flintstones vitamins for your child, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a very strategic, medically supported supplementation process for your child that is specific to your child. And we're talking about quality supplements, not, supplements that you would just go to the supermarket or you go to Walmart and pick up off the shelf. We're talking about supplements that are prescribed and that are monitored by a professional. And we do see changes in people when they get their supplements or their nutritional supplements uh, done properly and monitored. It can be quite a positive thing. We really ask families for no matter what the stress behavior is. We just happen to be talking about picky eating right now, but we tell people for whatever behavior you're seeing in your child, we really do need to take a holistic approach. The days are of just addressing behavior through behavior modification and ABA. We hope that those days are behind us. So we really do need to recognize that children need a team of people with a bunch of different perspectives and professional approaches to help. And the holistic approach, where we have a doctor, a nutritionist, play therapists, can't say enough good about play therapy. It can be very helpful. A speech therapist, an occupational therapist. If you have an extreme picky eater, an occupational therapist to have on your team is a very wise decision. They are so helpful with all kinds of things, whether there's a swallowing issue, if there's a mechanical problem in the mouth, if there is sensory processing issues, an occupational therapist can be very, very helpful. So we can't stress that enough, that a holistic approach to help talk about nutrition and digestion and sleep and exercise and all that kinds of wonderful things that makes people feel healthier. So what we say to people is that when kids feel holistically more happy and healthy, then your therapy days will be better. Your speech therapy will go better when children are feeling better. Your play therapy will be more productive. Days at school will be more productive when we have all of our areas of child development and interventions considered, as opposed to just ABA or behavior modification. So we really do need to look at the whole child and how to make sure that they have a green light day for everything, not just for around the food and nutrition aspect, but we really do want to make sure that we have everything covered. Oh, some people have a big trouble with this one. We are advocates for children getting dirty, playing with their food, being look at these girls, how much fun they're having. They were up to their elbows in some kind of foam or cream or something. Playing with your macaroni, dropping your food on the floor, all those kinds of things. We Because we for two generations were bananas about kids not being dirty and about them not playing with their food. Uh, there's a whole pile of sensory exploration that hasn't happened, and it's really important that we put that kind of play back into the lives of children. The sensory integration, the sensory input that comes from playing with your food and exploring things with your hands and your mouth and your feet and your toes and is uh, is really part of it. And we actually tell parents, to set up a corner somewhere in your house where kids can do lots of messy play, lots of sensory play, playing with rice and food and pasta and beans and peas and all those kinds of things. Is painting with pudding even is a really fun activity. So we're going to show in the next video, in our bonus video, some of those food therapies and what they can look like. But we really do need to let children play with their food. We love it. So this is really the last point that we want to talk about in this video is about connection and support. Living with a child who eats very, very limited foods, who will not try new things, who your whole house is sort of living under the stress bubble of this kind of challenging, picky eating behavior. We need to connect with people in our communities who are experiencing these same issues. And just because you have, a family member who spends a lot of time with you, who may be around your kids a lot, a babysitter or whatever, they just they know it, but they don't know it the way that you do. So know that the more that you connect with people, the more that you ask for help, the more that you are around people who understand this and understand how it feels, the better you will feel and the more elevated you will feel and empowered to continue to do the work for your child. And when we say connect with people, we mean connect with positive people, with people who are taking action to help, with people who are empowered to move forward, as opposed to people who are stuck in negative bias, who don't really are not helpful to your mood, yourself, or help your own self care. It's really important to make sure that you stay connected with people who can help and help elevate your mood and make you feel better. So, that's the things that we wanted to stress to people to help to set the stage for more green light days. So, as we were putting this together, we thought, there's a little bonus that we wanted to put in because we want to show people what food therapy for kids can look like. Um, we know that people still have feeding programs where they sit at a table and they got to eat 3 bites of something and they get reinforced or just touch it, but we want people to know that there's real world life experiences that are play based, that are fun, that lower anxiety, that you can have lots